have been carrying something heavy in your chest for so long now, have you not? I can see it in the way the moonlight catches the tiredness beneath your eyes tonight, the way your shoulders hold themselves as if bracing against an invisible weight. Here, in my small bamboo hut beside the river, the night air carries the scent of jasmine and wet stone, and I have lit a single lantern for you, for this moment when you have found your way to these words, because sleep will not come, because your heart needs to hear something true before it can finally rest. If these words bring you peace, you may return to this little sanctuary by joining our circle of gentle souls who gather here when the world feels too sharp. Tell me where you are listening from tonight. I like knowing where my travelers rest, whether you are curled beneath blankets in a city apartment or sitting by a window watching streetlights blur through rain, or lying in darkness with only the glow of your screen for company. Your presence here matters to me, and if you feel warmth gathering in your chest as we speak, you may stay close to this path by gently subscribing so these quiet stories can find you again when you need them. When I was very young, before I came to live in this temple by the river, I believed that truth was something hard and sharp, something that would cut through confusion like a blade through silk. My teacher, an old woman with hands like tree bark and eyes that held the softness of 1,000 dawns, taught me differently. She would sit with me beside this same river where I sit now, and she would say that truth is not a sword, but water, not something that cuts, but something that holds, not something that wounds, but something that washes clean. Tonight, I want to share with you the truth that has taken me 40 years of watching the river to understand. The truth about what you are worth, about why your heart breaks the way it does, about what it really means to let go. Not the letting go that people tell you about when they want you to hurry past your grief, but the real letting go that happens in your bones, in the deep, quiet places where your soul keeps its oldest memories. You see, there is a heaviness that settles into the body when we have been trying too hard for too long. It pools in the hollow beneath your ribs, like water gathering in a cupped palm. It makes your limbs feel like they are made of wet sand, makes your thoughts move through honey instead of air. You know this feeling. I can sense it in you, even through the distance between us, through whatever miles and mountains separate your breathing from mine. This heaviness is not weakness. Let me tell you this first, and let it sink into your tired bones. This heaviness is your body telling you a truth that your mind has been too frightened to hear. In my early days at the temple, when I was still learning to move through the world with the slowness of someone who has nowhere urgent to be, I would watch the senior monks and wonder at their peace. They moved like water, finding its way down a hillside, never forcing, never rushing, simply following the natural curve of things. One morning, I found my teacher sitting beside a pool where lotus flowers grew, and she was crying, not the desperate tears of crisis, but the slow, steady tears of someone releasing something ancient. When I asked her why she wept, She smiled and said she was practicing. Practicing what? I asked. Practicing being soft enough for the truth to move through me, she said. The truth needs softness to land properly. It needs a body that is not clenched against it, not armored, not defended. This is why you cannot sleep, dear one. Not because you are broken or failing or doing something wrong, but because your body has been holding itself so tightly against the world that even rest feels dangerous. Even closing your eyes feels like surrender. And perhaps it is. Perhaps surrender is exactly what your soul has been trying to tell you it needs. I want to tell you something about worth that no one may have told you correctly before. Worth is not something you earn by being productive or successful or even kind. Worth is not a trophy you win or a grade you achieve or a status you reach. Worth is the simple fact of your existence, as inherent to you as the way your lungs know how to breathe without your conscious instruction. You were born worthy. You will die worthy. Nothing you do or fail to do can change this essential truth. But I know how hard this is to believe when the world has taught you since childhood that you must prove yourself, that you must justify your presence, that you must earn your right to take up space. The knot in your stomach tightens when you think about all the ways you have fallen short of what you imagined you would be by now. The ache behind your sternum flares when you remember promises you made to yourself that you could not keep. These sensations are not punishment. They are your body grieving the lie it was taught to believe, the lie that you could ever be anything other than enough. Tonight, as the bamboo outside my window bends in the river wind, making that hollow music that sounds like the earth breathing, I remember a morning from many years ago that taught me about the nature of human worth. It was early spring, and the temple grounds were covered in cherry blossoms that had fallen during a storm the night before. The young monks were distressed, running about trying to gather the petals, trying to somehow restore the trees to their previous glory. But my teacher simply sat on the temple steps, watching. When I sat beside her, she picked up a single petal that had landed on her sleeve. "Look," she said, holding it to the morning light. "Is this petal less beautiful now that it has fallen? Is it worthless because it no longer clings to its branch? Or does it simply continue being exactly what it is, a petal, perfect in its petalness, whether it decorates a tree, or carpets the ground, or floats down the river to somewhere we will never see? You are like this petal. Your worth does not depend on where you are attached, what role you are playing, what function you are serving. Your worth simply is as complete when you are struggling as when you are soaring, as whole when you are lost as when you are found. There is something else I need to tell you about tonight. Something about the way heartbreak actually works in the human body. Not the heartbreak only of romantic loss, though that too has its place in this teaching, but the heartbreak of being human, of watching dreams dissolve like salt in water, of feeling time slip through your fingers like river sand, of knowing that everything you love will eventually transform into something else. This heartbreak is not a malfunction. It is not a sign that you are too sensitive or too weak or too anything. This heartbreak is your soul telling you that you are awake, that you are paying attention, that you are brave enough to love in a world where everything changes. The place where you feel this heartbreak most intensely, that spot beneath your ribs where it feels like something is simultaneously expanding and contracting, pushing against your bones while pulling you inward. This place is what my teacher called the grief door. Every human has one. It is the place where love and loss meet, where holding on and letting go exist in the same moment, where the fullness of what we have had touches the emptiness of what we have released. Most people spend their lives trying to keep this door closed, trying to guard against the sensation of that bittersweet ache. They armor themselves with busyness, with accomplishments, with the 1,000 distractions that modern life offers, like medicine, for a sickness that is not actually sickness at all. But tonight, in the quiet, with the moon reflecting off the river, like a path of silver coins leading nowhere and everywhere, I want to tell you that this door is meant to be open, not thrown wide in a way that overwhelms, but open like a window cracked to let in night air, open enough that the truth of your life can breathe. When my teacher was dying, I sat with her for many nights in the small room where she had slept for 60 years. The walls were bare, except for one piece of calligraphy that read, "Everything changes, everything continues." She was not afraid. Her breathing was labored, but her eyes held the same softness they had always held, like she was looking at something beautiful, just beyond what the rest of us could see. One night, when the pain was particularly intense, she reached for my hand and said, "The body knows how to do this, how to release, how to return. We have been practicing our whole lives. Every time we let out a breath, every time we allow sleep to take us, every time we trust the sun to rise without our assistance." She taught me that letting go is not about force or will or determination. Letting go happens the way a ripe fruit falls from a tree, naturally, when the time is right, when the connection that held it has fulfilled its purpose. You cannot make it happen faster by pulling, and you cannot prevent it by holding tighter. The fruit falls when it falls, and there is a perfection in this timing that the mind cannot understand, but the body knows. This is why you are tired tonight, beloved one, not because you are failing, but because you have been trying to control a process that is meant to unfold as naturally as the seasons change. You have been trying to force yourself to let go of something before your heart was ready, or trying to hold on to something that has already completed its cycle in your life. The exhaustion you feel is your body asking you to stop fighting against the current of your own becoming. Let me share with you now a story that my teacher told me on a night much like this one, when I could not sleep because I was grieving something I could not name. She found me sitting by the river at midnight, my feet in the cold water, trying to shock myself back into some kind of clarity. She sat beside me without speaking for a long time, just watching the way the current moved around the stones. And then she began. There was once a woman who lived in a village at the foot of a great mountain. Every morning, she would walk to the river to collect water in a beautiful clay jar that had been given to her by her grandmother. This jar was perfect, glazed in deep blue like the night sky, with small imperfections in the glaze that caught the light like stars. She treasured this jar more than anything else she owned, not because it was valuable in the way the world measures value, but because it carried the memory of her grandmother's hands, the warmth of her grandmother's kitchen, the sound of her grandmother's voice saying, "This jar will serve you well if you let it." For years, the woman carried water in this jar, careful always, protective always, wrapping it in cloth when she traveled, setting it in the safest corner of her home. But one morning, as she was walking back from the river, she stumbled on a root hidden beneath fallen leaves. The jar flew from her hands and shattered against the stones. She fell to her knees among the broken pieces, her dress soaking up the spilled water, her hands bleeding from trying to gather the sharp fragments. She stayed there for hours, unable to move, unable to accept what had happened. The sun moved across the sky, and still she knelt among the ruins of what she had loved. Finally, as evening approached, an old monk came walking along the path. He was carrying his own water in a simple wooden bucket. Nothing special, nothing beautiful, just functional. He stopped when he saw her there, saw the broken pottery scattered like blue stars across the dirt path. Instead of offering comfort or wisdom, he simply set down his bucket and began picking up the pieces with her. Not frantically, not with any hope of restoration, just slowly, carefully, placing each fragment into his cloth bag. When they had gathered every piece, even the smallest shards that had scattered into the grass, he looked at her with eyes that held no pity, only understanding. "These pieces," he said, "are still the jar. Broken does not mean gone. Broken does not mean worthless. It only means the jar has taken a new form." The woman wanted to argue, wanted to say that a broken jar cannot hold water, cannot serve its purpose, cannot be what it was meant to be. But the monk continued. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will take these pieces to the temple. We will mix them into the mortar that holds the stones of our meditation hall. Your grandmother's jar will become part of something that shelters people from storms, that holds space for prayer, that stands longer than any single vessel could stand. The jar is not ending, it is expanding." This story lived in me for years, before I understood what my teacher was trying to tell me that night by the river. You see, we believe that broken means failed, that shattered means lost, that when something cannot continue in the form we knew, it has no value. But nature knows nothing of this kind of thinking. When a tree falls in the forest, it becomes home for thousands of small creatures, food for fungi, eventually soil for new trees. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is truly lost. It only changes form. The tightness in your throat right now, the way your breath catches when you think about what you have lost or what has been taken from you, this is your body responding to the story of the jar, because you know this story. You have lived it. Something precious has broken in your life, has it not? Perhaps it was a relationship that you thought would last forever. Perhaps it was a version of yourself that you can no longer maintain. Perhaps it was a dream that you held so carefully for so long, only to watch it slip through your fingers like water, like light, like time itself. I see you trying to gather the pieces, the way the woman in the story knelt in the dirt with bleeding hands. I see you trying to understand how something that felt so solid could suddenly be in fragments at your feet. And I want to tell you, with all the gentleness that this quiet night can hold, that your broken pieces are still sacred. They still carry the essence of what they were. They are simply ready to become part of something else now, something you cannot yet imagine, because you are still seeing only what was, not what is becoming. In the temple where I learned to be still, there is a wall that visitors often touch with reverence, not knowing why they feel drawn to it. The mortar between its stones sparkles in certain light, tiny fragments of blue and gold and silver, catching the sun like unexpected jewels. These are the broken things that people brought to the temple over hundreds of years, ground into dust and mixed into the substance that holds the building together. Broken wedding bowls from marriages that ended, shattered prayer beads from practices that were abandoned, fragments of mirrors that once reflected faces now long gone. All of these broken things, these ended things, these grieved things, have become the glue that holds sacred space together. Your brokenness is like this too. The parts of you that feel shattered, unusable, damaged beyond repair, these are not flaws to be hidden or failures to be ashamed of. These are the places where the light gets in, as someone once wrote, but also the places where your light can finally get out. Because while you were whole, while you were maintaining that perfect surface, that careful composition, your light was contained, controlled, managed. Now, through the cracks, through the spaces between pieces, something more honest can emerge. There is a sensation that comes when we stop trying to hold our broken pieces in a shape of what they used to be. It feels like a softening in the belly, a warmth spreading across the chest, a gentle opening behind the eyes. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for so long, you forgot you were holding it. This sensation is not giving up. It is giving over. It is allowing the river of your life to carry your broken pieces downstream to where they need to go, trusting that nothing is ever truly wasted. Nothing is ever truly lost. The woman from the story came to the temple the next day, and then the day after that, and eventually she stayed, not because she was running from her life or hiding from her grief, but because she had discovered something in the breaking that she could not have learned any other way. She had discovered that love does not depend on the vessel remaining intact. The love she had for her grandmother did not live in the jar. It lived in her own heart, her own hands, her own memory. The jar had been a beautiful container for that love, but when the container broke, the love did not spill out with the water. The love remained, changed perhaps, deepened perhaps, but undiminished. This is what I want you to understand tonight about your own broken places. The love is still there. The beauty is still there. The meaning is still there. It has simply been released from its container, and now it is free to take whatever shape it needs to take. Sometimes that shape is grief. Sometimes it is relief. Sometimes it is a combination of both that has no name in any language, but that your body knows how to feel. When you cannot sleep, it is often because you are trying to hold too many pieces in place at once, trying to maintain a shape that no longer serves you, trying to prevent the natural dissolution that wants to happen so that something new can form. Your insomnia is not your enemy. It is your deep self refusing to go unconscious, while important work is being done, while essential transformations are taking place, while your soul is learning how to exist in a new configuration. My teacher used to say that there are two kinds of tired. There is the tired that comes from doing, from effort, from pushing against the world. And there is the tired that comes from becoming, from allowing change, from letting your old self dissolve so that your new self can emerge. The first kind of tired is sharp, edgy, frustrating. The second kind is deep, soft, almost sweet. It is the tiredness of a seed that has finally split open underground. The tiredness of a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. The tiredness of a river that is finally carved through stone to find a new path. You are feeling the second kind of tired tonight. I can tell by the way you have made it this far into these words, by the way you are letting them wash over you like water over stones, smoothing your rough edges, finding your hidden hollows. This tiredness is holy. It is the tiredness of transformation, and it cannot be rushed any more than you can rush the moon across the sky or hurry the seasons in their turning. The night has grown deeper while we have been speaking. Here by the river, the frogs have begun their evening chorus, a sound that rises and falls like breathing, like the pulse of the earth itself. The bamboo continues its hollow song, and somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings, once, twice, 3 times, marking not the hour, but simply the moment, this moment, the only moment that has ever existed. When my teacher gave me her meditation cushion before she died, it was worn thin in places. The fabric faded from decades of use. She could have given me something newer, something more beautiful in the conventional sense. But she wanted me to have this one, she said, because it had absorbed thousands of hours of practice, thousands of moments of returning to stillness, thousands of small enlightenments and comfortable failures. The worn places were not damage. They were evidence of dedication, of showing up day after day to meet herself exactly as she was. Your worn places, your tired places, your broken places, these are not damage either. They are evidence of your willingness to be human, to engage with life rather than merely observe it, to risk your heart even knowing it would eventually break. Not everyone has this courage. Not everyone is willing to live with such engagement, such presence, such commitment to feeling what needs to be felt. Let me tell you now about someone I knew, someone whose story has lived in my bones for 20 years and still teaches me something new each time I remember it. Her name was May, and she came to the temple not seeking enlightenment or peace or any of the things people usually come seeking. She came because she could no longer bear to be in her own home, where every corner held a memory of her daughter, who had died at the age of 7 from an illness that moved through her small body faster than anyone could understand or stop. May arrived at our gates on a morning when the mist was so thick you could barely see 3 feet ahead. I was the one who opened the door to her knock, and I will never forget the way she stood there, not asking for anything, not even really seeing me, just standing as if she had walked as far as she could walk, and this happened to be where her feet stopped. Her clothes were expensive, but wrinkled, her hair uncombed, her eyes holding that particular emptiness that comes not from lacking something, but from having had everything and then having it taken away. My teacher took one look at her and said, "Give her the room beside the kitchen, where she can hear the sounds of life continuing. Give her simple work to do with her hands. Do not ask her to meditate. Do not ask her to pray. Just let her be here, inside the rhythm of our days, until she remembers how to breathe, without counting each breath as a betrayal of the one who no longer breathes." For the first month, May barely spoke. She would help prepare meals, cutting vegetables with a precision that suggested her mind needed the focus of the blade, the board, the perfect uniformity of carrots becoming smaller pieces of carrot. She would sweep the paths with the same intensity, as if each leaf she gathered was essential, as if the cleanliness of the walkway was the only thing standing between the world and complete chaos. At night, I would hear her walking, her bare feet on the wooden floors, creating a rhythm like a heartbeat that had forgotten how to rest. The weight she carried was visible in her body, the way grief is always visible if you know how to look. It pulled her shoulders forward and down, as if she was perpetually curving around an absence, protecting a space where something precious used to be. It lived in the hollow beneath her collarbones, those delicate bowls that seemed too empty, as if something essential had been scooped out. It showed in the way she held her arms, often crossed over her middle, not in defense, but in an attempt to hold something that was no longer there. One evening, about 2 months after she arrived, I found her sitting by the pond where the koi fish swim their endless circles. She was holding a piece of bread, breaking off small pieces and throwing them to the fish, watching them surface with their mouths open like questions. I sat beside her, not speaking, just being there in that way that sometimes helps when words would only add weight to an already unbearable load. After a long time, she said, she loved to feed fish. We would go to the park every Sunday with old bread. She would name each fish, even though they were different fish each time. She was convinced They remembered her. The way her voice broke on the word remembered told me everything about the particular texture of her grief. It was not just that her daughter was gone. It was that the world was continuing to create moments that her daughter should have been part of. Sunday mornings that arrived without anyone to name the fish. Pieces of bread that would never be broken by those small hands. Memories that would never be made. The future grief, the grief of all the things that would never happen, was almost heavier than the grief of what had already been lost. I want to tell you what May taught me about grief, because perhaps you are carrying your own loss tonight, your own absence that shapes everything around it, like gravity bends light. Perhaps you know the way grief lives in the body, not as a visitor, but as a resident, setting up its home in your cells, changing the way food tastes, the way sleep comes or does not come, the way laughter feels like a betrayal until suddenly, one day, it feels like a tribute. May stayed with us for 1 year exactly. During that time, she taught me that grief is not something to be overcome or processed or moved through in any linear way. Grief is a love with nowhere to go, a reaching for someone who cannot reach back, a conversation that has become a monologue but continues anyway, because stopping would mean accepting an end that the heart cannot accept. She taught me this one morning when I found her in the garden, planting seeds for vegetables she would never see grow because she had already decided to leave before harvest time. When I asked her why she was planting them, she looked at me with eyes that had found their way back from that terrible emptiness, not to joy exactly, but to something more like acceptance. My daughter will never plant seeds, she said, but I can plant them for her. I can put my hands in the soil for her hands. I can water these plants with the same tenderness I would have taught her. I can love the world for both of us. This is what the body knows about grief that the mind struggles to understand. Grief does not diminish over time. It does not fade or lessen or resolve. What changes is not the grief, but our capacity to carry it. We grow around it the way a tree grows around a fence until the fence becomes part of the tree. Still there, still metal in the middle of wood, but incorporated, integrated, part of the living structure, the place in your chest that aches when you think of what you have lost, that soft, bruised feeling beneath your sternum. That is not pathology. That is your heart making room for absence, learning to hold emptiness with the same tenderness it once held presence. This is holy work, this expansion of the heart to include what is no longer here. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone is brave enough to let their heart break all the way open instead of closing it off to protect against further damage. There was a day near the end of May's stay with us when I saw her laughing, really laughing. Not the polite social laugh that grieving people sometimes perform to reassure others, but the kind of laugh that comes from the belly, that takes over the whole body, that makes the eyes water. She was watching 2 young monks trying to catch a chicken that had escaped from the coop, and the chicken was leading them on a chase through the garden, that was pure comedy. Feathers flying, robes tangling, vegetables being trampled in a way that should have been distressing, but was somehow hilarious. She laughed until she cried, and then she cried until she was laughing again, and then she did both at the same time, standing there in the garden with tears streaming down her face, while her body shook with something that was neither purely joy nor purely sorrow, but something more complex, more complete, more human. When she finally caught her breath, she looked at me and said, "I thought I would never laugh again. I thought laughing would mean I had forgotten her, that I had betrayed her memory. But this laughter, it has her in it. She would have loved this chaos. She would have been cheering for the chicken." This is what I learned from watching May discover that joy and grief can coexist, not in separate compartments, but mixed together like water and salt, impossible to separate once combined. The salt does not disappear. It changes the nature of the water, makes it denser, changes its freezing point, makes it hold heat differently. But salted water is still water. It still flows, still nourishes, still finds its way. Your grief, whatever shape it takes, whatever loss you are carrying, is like this salt. It has changed you at a molecular level. You will never be unsalted again. But this does not mean you cannot flow. It does not mean you cannot nourish others with your depths. It does not mean you cannot find your way to the sea, where all waters eventually arrive, carrying their minerals and memories, their particular composition of elements that tells the story of every place they have been. The night before May left the temple, she gave me something. It was a small stone, smooth and ordinary, nothing special, except that it was warm from being held in her hand. This was in her pocket when she died, she said. She collected stones everywhere we went. Our house was full of them, little pieces of every place she had been. I have been carrying this one for a year, and now I want you to have it, not because I am letting her go, but because I am learning that love is not diminished by being shared. It multiplies. Every person who holds this stone adds to the love it carries, not replaces it. I still have that stone. It sits on the small altar in my room, next to a candle I light each evening. Sometimes I hold it when I cannot sleep, feeling the smoothness that comes from being touched so many times by so many hands. First, the small hands of a child who saw beauty everywhere. Then the grieving hands of a mother who loved beyond loss. Then my own hands trying to understand the weight of such love, such loss, such continuation. The tiredness you feel tonight may be connected to a grief like this, a loss that has reorganized your inner world so completely that you no longer recognize the landscape of your own heart. Or perhaps it is connected to a different kind of loss, the kind that happens slowly, so gradually you do not notice until one day you realize that something essential has been leaking out of your life like air from a tiny puncture, leaving you deflated, confused, unsure how to reinflate what has collapsed. There is another kind of grief that no one talks about, the grief of the life unlived, the person you thought you would become but did not, the dreams that died not in a moment of dramatic loss, but slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a plant that is not exactly dying, but is definitely not thriving, existing in that gray space between growth and decay. This grief lives in the body too, often in the joints, those places where movement happens, where possibility lives. It shows up as stiffness in the morning, as a reluctance to reach for things, as a subtle pulling back from full extension, full expression, full engagement with the scope of your own life. When May finally left the temple, she did not return to her old life. She could not. That life had been built around a center that no longer existed, like a house constructed around a tree that has been removed, leaving only an emptiness where the essential supporting structure used to be. Instead, she went to live by the sea, in a small house where she could hear the waves at night, their endless conversation of approach and withdrawal, gathering and releasing, reaching and letting go. She wrote to me once, a letter that arrived on paper so thick with salt air that it felt almost damp. She said the sea was teaching her something that the temple had begun but could not complete. The sea, she wrote, never stops grieving and never stops celebrating. Every wave is both an ending and a beginning. Every tide is both a loss and a return. The sea holds all the tears that have ever been cried, and yet it still sparkles in the sunlight, still dances with the moon, still offers itself as a place of play for children who do not yet know the weight it carries. This is the teaching moment, the place where all these stories converge into a single understanding that your body has been trying to tell you all along. You are not meant to choose between grieving and living, between holding on and letting go, between remembering and moving forward. You are meant to do all of these things simultaneously. The way the ocean holds both storms and calm, both depth and surface, both darkness and light. The truth you needed to hear tonight is not that everything will be okay, because that is too simple and possibly not even true. The truth is that you already have everything you need to meet whatever comes, to hold whatever needs holding, to release whatever needs releasing. This capacity is built into your very cells, into the way your heart knows how to break and keep beating, the way your lungs know how to empty and fill, the way your body knows how to be wounded and heal, sometimes with scars, sometimes without, but always with the fundamental integrity of your being intact. Listen to what your body is telling you right now. Feel the weight of your bones against whatever is supporting you. Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs without any effort on your part, without any conscious decision to continue breathing. Feel the subtle movement of blood through your vessels, that river system that delivers life to every cell without your management or supervision. Your body knows how to do difficult things. It has been doing them since before you were born, when you were just a cluster of cells, dividing in the darkness, following instructions written in a language older than words. The exhaustion you feel is real and worthy of respect. It is not a failure of will or a lack of strength. It is the natural consequence of being a conscious being in a world that asks us to bear witness to both beauty and terror, often in the same moment. You are tired because you have been paying attention. You are tired because you have been feeling what needs to be felt. You are tired because you have been trying to hold yourself together when what you really need is to let yourself gently come apart so that you can reassemble in a configuration that matches who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. There is a practice we do in the temple when someone cannot find rest, when the mind spins like a wheel that has lost contact with the ground, when the body holds itself in a state of perpetual readiness for a danger that never quite arrives, but never quite passes either. It is simple, so simple that the mind often rejects it as insufficient for the complexity of what it is carrying. But the body understands simplicity in a way the mind never will. Imagine with me now that you are holding a smooth river stone in your palm. It is neither warm nor cool, but exactly the temperature of your skin, as if it has been waiting in your hand long enough to become part of you. This stone has weight, not enough to burden, but enough to anchor, enough to remind you that you are here, in this moment, in this body, on this earth that knows how to hold heavy things without complaint. As you hold this imaginary stone, let your breath begin to slow, not through force, but through invitation, the way you might invite a frightened animal to come closer, with patience, with gentleness, with no sudden movements. Let each exhale be slightly longer than the inhale. Before it, not counting, not measuring, just allowing a natural lengthening, like shadows, growing longer as evening approaches. Now imagine that with each exhale, the stone in your hand grows slightly warmer, as if your breath is warming it, as if your life force is transferring into this simple object. And with each inhale, imagine that warmth spreading from the stone back into your palm, up your arm, into your chest, like a gentle current of comfort, moving through channels that have been there all along, waiting to carry something softer than anxiety, something quieter than fear. This is how the monks warm their prayer stones on cold mornings, holding them through the pre-dawn meditation, breathing warmth into cold rock until it becomes a small sun in their palms, a portable comfort, a reminder that we can transform the temperature of things through nothing more than presence and patience and breath. You have this same capacity. You can warm what has grown cold in you. You can soften what has grown hard. You can gentle what has grown sharp. The stone you are imagining is every stone you have ever noticed, every pebble you picked up as a child, every rock you skipped across water, every mountain you have seen or imagined. It carries the patience of geological time, the memory of when it was mountain, when it was boulder, when it was grain of sand. It knows about transformation that happens so slowly that no single lifetime could witness the whole of it. It knows about pressure that creates rather than destroys, about heat that melts and reshapes rather than simply burns. Let this stone in your imagination become heavier now, but not unpleasantly, Let it have the weight of sleep approaching, the weight of a tired child in your arms, the weight of a blanket on a cold night. This weight is not burden, but comfort, not obligation, but invitation. It says to your body, you can put down what you have been carrying. You can let the earth hold you for a while. You can trust the ground beneath you to remain steady while you rest. As night deepens here by the river, I want to tell you one more story, the gentlest one, the one that will carry you into sleep if you let it. This story comes from my very first night in the temple, when I was young and frightened, and certain I had made a terrible mistake in coming to this place of silence and stillness, when my whole life had been noise and motion. I could not sleep that first night. The quiet was too loud, if such a thing makes sense. Without the familiar sounds of the city, my ears strained for something to hold on to, finding only the occasional crack of bamboo in the wind, the distant sound of water over stone, the even more distant sound of temple bells from further up the mountain. I lay on my thin mat, feeling the hardness of the floor beneath me, missing my soft bed, missing the life I had left, missing the person I had been before I decided to become someone else. Just before dawn, when the darkness was at its deepest, just before it would begin its slow surrender to light, I heard footsteps in the corridor outside my room. They were soft, careful, the steps of someone trying not to disturb, and they stopped right outside my door. Then I heard the subtle sound of something being placed on the floor, and the footsteps continued down the hall. When I finally gathered the courage to open my door, I found a small cup of tea, still warm, and beside it a single camellia blossom, pink as the dawn that was just beginning to touch the edge of the sky. I never learned who left these gifts, though I suspected it was my teacher, who had a way of knowing when someone needed comfort without being told. But what I remember most about that morning was not the tea or the flower, but the understanding that someone knew I was struggling and had chosen to meet that struggle, not with advice or wisdom or even words, but with simple warmth, simple beauty, simple evidence that I was seen, that I was held in someone awareness with kindness. The tea cooled as I sat there in my doorway, watching the world slowly lighten, but I drank it anyway, the lukewarm liquid somehow perfect, somehow exactly what my body needed. The camellia I kept on my windowsill until it finally browning and fell apart, and even then I kept the petals, pressing them between the pages of a journal where they left pink stains like watercolor memories. Years later, I learned to leave similar gifts for new arrivals, always before dawn, always without revealing myself, always with that same combination of warmth and beauty, something for the body and something for the soul. It became a way of saying what words could not quite carry, that no one is alone in their sleeplessness, that someone understands the particular weight of 3 a.m, that the darkness you are moving through is not endless, even when it feels that way. Tonight, consider this story, these words, your cup of tea and your camellia blossom. They are my gift to you across whatever distance separates us through whatever struggles you are carrying, into whatever darkness you are navigating. You may be lying in bed with your phone, creating a small cave of light around your face. You may be sitting in a chair by a window, watching the night world continue its secret life. You may be walking, unable to be still, your body needing movement to process what your mind cannot quite grasp. Wherever you are, however you are not alone in this moment. The truth about sleeplessness is that it often comes when we are in transition, when we are between who we were and who we are becoming, when the old self has dissolved, but the new self has not quite formed. This liminal space, this threshold time, is uncomfortable in the way that all birthings are uncomfortable. Something is trying to emerge through you, and your sleeplessness is part of that emergence. Your conscious mind refusing to shut down because it senses something important is happening, something that needs witness, something that needs attendance. In the temple, we have a saying that the body never lies. The mind can deceive, can create elaborate stories to protect us from truths we are not ready to face. The heart can confuse one feeling for another, can mistake attachment for love, fear for intuition, but the body only knows how to tell the truth. When you cannot sleep, your body is telling you something true. When your chest feels tight, your body is telling you something true. When your shoulders ache from holding themselves so carefully, your body is telling you something true. The truth your body is telling you tonight might be that you have been trying to live someone else's life, wearing a shape that does not fit your soul, speaking words that do not match your inner voice. Or it might be telling you that you are ready for something you have been resisting, ready to let go of a protection that once served you, but now only constrains you, ready to be seen in a way that feels terrifying but necessary. Or perhaps it is simply telling you that you are human, and humans need rest, need comfort, need to be told that their struggles are seen and honored and shared by others who have walked similar paths through different forests. There is a phenomenon that happens in bodies of water called turnover, where the layers that have been stable for months suddenly shift. The bottom rising to the top sinking to the bottom. Everything that was hidden becoming visible, everything that was visible disappearing into depths. This happens when the temperature reaches a certain point, when the density of different layers becomes similar enough that they can no longer maintain their separation. Lakes that have been clear become cloudy. Fish that live at different depths suddenly find themselves sharing space. Everything that had settled gets stirred up again. You are experiencing something like this turnover in your own inner waters. The layers of yourself that you have kept separate, the parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden, the person you are and the person you pretend to be. These layers are mixing, creating temporary confusion, but ultimately leading to a more integrated wholeness. The murkiness you feel is not dysfunction, it is reorganization. The disturbance is not destruction, it is transformation. When this kind of inner turnover happens, sleep becomes difficult because sleep requires a certain kind of surrender. And how can you surrender when you do not know what you are surrendering to? When you cannot predict what self you will wake up as? When the very ground of your being feels like it is shifting beneath you? This is why I want to offer you a different way to think about rest, not as unconsciousness, but as a conscious allowing, not as absence, but as a different kind of presence. Think of the way water rests, never truly still, but always moving with such subtlety that it appears peaceful. Think of the way trees rest, not by stopping their growth, but by slowing it to a pace that matches the season. Think of the way the earth rests, continuing to turn, but facing away from the sun, accepting darkness as part of its rhythm, not as punishment or failure, but as necessary balance. You can rest like this, actively, but gently, consciously, but softly, with awareness that does not grip, but floats. Here by the river tonight, the moon has risen high enough that it silvers everything it touches, turning the bamboo into brushstrokes of light and shadow, making the water look like a path of molten metal flowing toward some mysterious destination. This is the same moon that is shining wherever you are, the same ancient light that has witnessed every sleepless night since humans first learned to love and therefore learned to grieve. You are part of an endless procession of souls who have lain awake wondering if they were doing life wrong, if they were broken in some fundamental way, if mourning would ever come again. Let me tell you something about mourning that might help you release your grip on the need to force sleep. Mourning always comes, not metaphorically, not eventually, but actually and reliably, every single day since the earth began its spinning. You have never once had to make mourning happen through your effort or anxiety or vigilance. It comes whether you sleep or not, whether you are ready or not, whether you believe in it or not. This is the kind of truth your bones understand even when your mind forgets, the kind of reliability that makes life possible. The bamboo grove near my hut has been growing for longer than anyone can remember. Some of the stalks are as thick as my waist, reaching toward the sky with such determination that they seem to pull the earth up with them. But what most people do not know about bamboo is that it grows in cycles of visible and invisible progress. For years, the root system expands underground, creating a network of connection and support that no one can see. Then, suddenly, when the foundation is strong enough, the bamboo shoots appear and grow so fast you can almost watch it happen, sometimes 3 feet in a single day. Your life might be in the underground phase right now, the phase where all the growth is happening in places no one can see, not even you. You might be developing the root system that will support the rapid growth that comes later. This invisible growth is just as real, just as vital, just as worthy of respect as the growth everyone can see. Your sleeplessness might be because you are doing the deep work of root development, creating connections and strength in the darkness that will eventually support something magnificent. There is something else about bamboo that feels important to tell you tonight. It is hollow. This is not a flaw or a weakness, but the source of its strength. The hollow center allows it to bend without breaking, to dance with the wind rather than resist it, to make music when the breeze moves through it. Perhaps the emptiness you feel, the hollow ache in your chest, is not something to be filled, but something to be honored as the source of your flexibility, your music, your ability to move with life rather than against it. I want to teach you something now, something practical that you can do with your sleepless body, something that comes from centuries of temple wisdom about how to be with difficulty without being consumed by it. This practice is called warming the prayer stones, though you do not need actual stones or prayers to do it. All you need is your own body and your willingness to be gentle with yourself. Begin by placing both hands on your chest, one on top of the other, right over the place where you feel the most sensation, whether that is tightness or ache or flutter or weight. Let your hands simply rest there, not trying to fix or change anything, just making contact the way you might touch a friend who is crying, present but not invasive, supportive but not controlling. Feel the warmth of your hands beginning to gather against your chest. This is your own warmth, generated by your own living body, circulating through channels that have been functioning since before you were born. Let yourself receive this warmth as if it were coming from someone who loves you, because in a way it is. It is coming from the part of you that keeps breathing even when you forget to pay attention, the part that keeps your heart beating even when it is broken, the part that keeps healing your wounds even when you pick at them. Now, imagine that beneath your hands, inside your chest, there is a stone, not a heavy stone or a sharp stone, but a smooth river stone that has been worn gentle by water and time. This stone has been absorbing everything you have been feeling, all the grief and confusion and longing and fear, absorbing it not as burden, but as information, as the story of your becoming. With each breath, imagine this stone growing warmer, not hot, but warm, like sun on skin, warm like tears, warm like the first sip of tea on a cold morning. As this warmth spreads from the stone in your chest, let it move like honey through your body, slow and sweet and golden, finding every place that has been holding tension, every corner that has been clenched against the possibility of more hurt. This warmth does not demand that you relax. It simply offers relaxation as a possibility, the way the river offers itself to the feet of anyone who stands at its edge, available but not insistent, present but not pressuring. Keep your hands on your chest as long as feels good, as long as the warmth continues to build and spread and soften what has been hard. There is no right amount of time for this practice. Your body will tell you when it has received what it needs, when the stone in your chest has been warmed enough, when the prayer that has no words has been heard by the part of you that listens deeper than ears can hear. Now, I want to tell you the last story of this long night, the one that will carry you across the threshold into sleep if you allow it. This is a story about the river itself, the one that flows past my hut, the one whose voice has been the backdrop to everything I have shared with you tonight. But really, it is a story about all rivers, about the nature of water to find its way, about the patience of flow, about how something so soft can carve through stone, not through force, but through persistence, through the gentle repetition of simply being itself. Many years ago, before I came to the temple, before I knew that I would spend my life beside this river, I lived in a village where the river had dried up. It had been a slow dying, taking place over several seasons, the water level dropping so gradually that at first people hardly noticed. The fish began to disappear. The plants along the banks grew brittle and brown. The stones that had been hidden underwater emerged like bones, white and smooth, and somehow accusatory, as if they were evidence of a crime we had committed without knowing. The village elders said it was because we had forgotten to honor the river spirit. The younger people said it was because of changes upstream, dams and diversions that had nothing to do with us. The children did not care about causes. They only knew that their swimming hole had become a muddy depression, that the frogs had gone silent, that something essential had been taken from their world. I was one of those children, though old enough to understand that the adults were frightened, that a village without water could not survive, that we might have to leave the only home any of us had known. At night, I would lie awake, listening to the absence of the river sound, that constant murmur that had been the soundtrack to my entire life until it was gone. The silence was so loud, it made my ears ache, made my chest feel hollow, made sleep impossible. One night, when the moon was dark and the stars were hidden behind clouds, I heard something that made me sit up in my bed. It was the faintest sound, so quiet I thought at first. I was imagining it. But there it was again, a tiny trickle, a whisper of water over stone. I crept from my house barefoot, following the sound through the darkness, my hands outstretched to feel my way, my heart beating so hard I was afraid it would drown out the delicate sound I was following. I found it at the bottom of what had been the riverbed, a spring no bigger than my palm, bubbling up from somewhere deep underground. The water was cold and clear, and when I tasted it, it had a mineral tang that spoke of depths I could not imagine, of passages through rock that had never seen sunlight, of patience that measured time in centuries rather than seasons. I sat there in the darkness with my feet in that tiny trickle, feeling it run over my toes like a promise, like a secret, like the beginning of something I did not yet understand. I told no one about the spring, not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because I sensed it was too fragile for attention, too small for hope, too precious for the weight of a whole village's desperation. Every night I would visit it, and every night it was a little stronger, a little wider, as if it was gathering courage from the darkness, as if it needed the privacy of night to remember how to be a river again. The water found old channels that had been dry so long They looked like scars in the earth. It touched roots that had shriveled into themselves, coaxing them back to life with a gentleness that made me understand something about resurrection that no temple teaching would later improve upon. It moved around obstacles without frustration, finding the easiest path, not from laziness, but from wisdom, understanding that the goal was not to conquer the landscape, but to bless it with passage. One morning, after I had been visiting the spring for a full cycle of the moon, I woke to shouting in the village. The river is returning, voices called. The water is coming back. I ran with everyone else to the riverbed, and there it was, not the full river we remembered, but something, enough, a flow that caught the morning light and threw it back at the sky like celebration, like forgiveness, like the earth telling us that endings are rarely as final as they seem. The elders said their prayers had been answered. The younger people said the upstream conditions must have changed. The children did not care about explanations. They stood knee-deep in the returning water, laughing and splashing, their joy so pure it needed no reason, no story, no meaning beyond itself. But I knew something the others did not. I knew about the small beginning in the darkness, about the patience of water finding its way, about how something that seems dead can be quietly gathering life in places no one is looking. This is what your body is doing in your sleeplessness, in your exhaustion, in your struggle to find rest. You are that underground spring, gathering yourself in the darkness, finding the old channels that remember how to flow, touching the dry roots of who you used to be and coaxing them back to green. It may seem like nothing is happening, like you are stuck in some endless night of wakefulness, but beneath the surface, in the deep places where transformation always begins, water is finding its way back to you. The river taught me something else that night, something about the relationship between holding and flowing that feels important for you to know as you lie there, trying to decide whether to hold on or let go, whether to resist or surrender, whether to fight for sleep or accept wakefulness. The river does both simultaneously. It holds its banks even as it flows past them. It carries sediment and deposits it, picks up and puts down, gathers and releases, all in the same movement. There is no contradiction in this, no conflict, no choice that excludes the other choice. You can do this too. You can hold what needs holding while releasing what needs releasing. You can grieve what is gone while welcoming what is arriving. You can honor your exhaustion while generating the energy for one more breath, one more heartbeat, one more moment of being magnificently, impossibly, beautifully alive in a universe that against all odds managed to organize atoms into awareness, into you, into this moment of connection between us. The river beside my hut is speaking now in its nighttime voice, lower and slower than during the day, as if it too grows sleepy when the moon is high. Sometimes I think it is telling the stones the story of where it has been, all the mountains it has touched, all the valleys it has carved, all the seeds it has carried to new soil. Sometimes I think it is singing a lullaby to the fish that sleep in its pools their gills moving in rhythm with something older than memory. Sometimes I think it is simply being a river, and that is sermon enough, scripture enough, truth enough for anyone who needs to remember how to flow. There was a monk here many years ago who never slept, not from insomnia or anxiety, but from a vow he had taken to remain aware, to never miss a moment of the world turning, to be conscious for every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle shift in the light. He lived this way for 7 years, sitting by the river through nights that the rest of us slept through, watching seasons change in increments too small for normal attention to catch. When I asked him what he had learned from all this wakefulness, he smiled and said that sleep and waking are not opposites, but partners, like in-breath and out-breath, like river and bank, like sound and silence. He said that the body knows how to rest even when the mind remains aware, that there is a kind of sleep that happens with eyes open, a kind of rest that comes not from unconsciousness, but from complete acceptance of what is. He taught me to sit by the river when I could not sleep, not fighting the wakefulness, but befriending it, asking it what it had come to teach me, thanking it for keeping me company through the dark hours when most of the world dreams. He said that insomnia is often the soul refusing to miss something important, like a child fighting sleep because the conversation of adults has grown interesting, because something significant is being revealed that only comes out after bedtime. What is your soul refusing to miss tonight? What conversation is happening in the darkness that you need to hear? What truth is being whispered by your own deep self that can only be heard when the noise of day has faded? These are not questions that need answers, only invitations to curiosity rather than frustration, to wonder rather than worry, to presence rather than problem solving. The bamboo is singing its hollow song again, that sound that is nothing like music and everything like music, organized by wind into patterns that will never repeat exactly, that exist only in this moment before dissolving into memory and then into forgetting. This is the song of impermanence, and strange as it may seem, it is the most comforting song I know. It says that whatever you are experiencing will change, not because you force it to, but because change is the nature of all things. Your sleeplessness will transform into sleep, perhaps not tonight, but eventually, inevitably, as surely as rivers find the sea. Gentle Monk Stories. Title: The Truth You Needed to Hear to Finally Sleep. Tonight, continued. Your body is growing heavier now. I can feel it through these words. The way they are landing differently than they did when we began. Landing softer, sinking deeper, finding the places in you that have been waiting all day, all week, perhaps all your life, to receive this particular quality of gentleness. This is not the heaviness of burden, but the heaviness of honey, of summer afternoons, of a cat finding the perfect patch of sunlight. This is your body, remembering its relationship with gravity, remembering that it does not always have to hold itself up, that sometimes it can allow itself to be held. The monk who never slept eventually did close his eyes, not from breaking his vow, but from completing it. He had learned what he needed to learn from all those wakeful nights, had received the teaching that only comes to those who are willing to sit with difficulty until it transforms into something else. On his last night of waking, he told me that he could finally hear what the silence had been trying to tell him all along. It was saying that rest is not the opposite of awareness, but its deepest expression, that true consciousness includes the ability to release consciousness, that the highest form of control is knowing when to stop controlling. He slept for 3 days after that, and when he woke, his eyes had changed, not their color or shape, but something behind them, some quality of seeing that made everyone who met him feel truly seen, truly known, truly accepted exactly as they were. He had learned to look at the world the way sleep looks at the waking, with infinite patience, infinite acceptance, infinite willingness to receive whatever comes without judgment or urgency. This is how I am looking at you now, through these words, across this distance that is no distance at all in the realm of compassion. I see your tiredness and I honor it. I see your struggle and I bless it. I see your longing for rest and I hold space for it to be fulfilled in its own time, in its own way, without force, without frustration, with only the gentle inevitability of water finding its level. The spring that brought the river back to my childhood village is still flowing. I visited it last year, an old woman returning to the place where she first learned that resurrection happens in darkness, in secret, in spaces too small for hope, but just right for beginning. The village is different now, of course. The children who splashed in the returning river are grown, with children of their own who take water for granted the way children should, who cannot imagine a world where the river does not sing them to sleep each night. But the spring remembers. It still bubbles up from that unknowable depth, still cold, still carrying that mineral taste of deep earth, of passages through stone that know nothing of sunlight or human time. I sat beside it for a whole night, feeling like I was visiting an old teacher, one who had shown me something essential about persistence, about how healing begins, about the patience required for any real transformation. As I sat there, I realized that we are all springs like this, all sources of something that comes from deeper than we can fathom, that emerges through us but does not originate from us. The love you have felt and given, the creativity that has moved through you, the moments of unexpected strength when you thought you had nothing left, these all come from the same source that feeds underground springs, that fills rivers, that becomes clouds, that falls as rain, that cycles endlessly through forms, but never loses its essential nature. Your sleeplessness might be because you have temporarily lost touch with your source, the way a spring can become blocked by debris, by shifts in the earth, by the accumulated weight of too much pressure. But the source itself has not gone anywhere. It is still there, patient in the darkness, gathering itself, finding new passages through the stone of your being, preparing to bubble up in ways you cannot predict or control, but can trust, can absolutely trust, the way you trust your next breath to come even though you have no idea where the air comes from or how your lungs know what to do with it. Let me tell you what the river sounds like right now, in this exact moment as I speak these words to you. It is lower than before, quieter, as if it too is preparing for sleep. There is a rhythm to it that matches something in the human body, some frequency that our ancestors knew to listen for when they needed comfort, when they needed to remember that they were part of something larger than their individual struggles. The sound has layers, like music has layers, a low constant that never changes, and over it, these small variations, little splashes and gurgles that are never exactly the same twice. If you listen with your whole body instead of just your ears, you can feel how this sound loosens things that have been clenched, how it creates space between thoughts that have been pressed too close together, how it washes through you like the gentlest possible flood, not destroying anything, but rearranging everything into a softer configuration. This is what the sound of water does to the human nervous system. It tells the ancient parts of your brain that you are near a source of life, that you can rest here, that this is a safe place to let your vigilance soften. I am making you a bed of words now, laying them down one after another, like someone laying out blankets beside the river, each sentence another layer of softness for you to sink into. These words ask nothing of you. They do not need you to remember them, or understand them, or even believe them. They only need you to receive them, the way the earth receives rain, the way the river receives the moon reflection, the way sleep receives the tired body when it finally allows itself to lay down its careful watchfulness. There is a place in the temple where the floor has been worn into a shallow depression by centuries of people sitting in the same spot to meditate. It is smooth as water-worn stone, shaped perfectly to hold a human body in seated position. When new students discover it, they often cry, not from sadness, but from the sudden understanding that they are part of a lineage, that others have sat where they are sitting, have struggled with the same struggles, have found whatever peace is possible to find in this difficult and beautiful world. You are part of this lineage too, not just of meditators, but of humans who have laid awake, wrestling with truth, with loss, with the weight of being conscious in a universe that offers no easy answers. Every person who has ever stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m. is your ancestor in this practice of difficult wakefulness. Every person who has ever felt their heart break and keep beating is your teacher in the art of continuing. Every person who has finally found rest after thinking it would never come again is holding space for your eventual rest, your inevitable return to the rhythm of sleeping and waking that is your birthright. The river is telling me something to tell you, something it wants you to know before you cross into sleep. It says that you do not have to earn rest by being good enough, or tired enough, or anything enough. Rest is not a reward for hard work or a consolation prize for suffering. Rest is what happens when you stop trying to be anything other than what you are, when you stop swimming upstream and let the current carry you, when you trust that the river knows where it is going, even when you do not. All night we have been spiraling slowly toward this moment, like water circling a drain, like a bird descending in lazy circles toward its nest, like the moon making its patient way across the sky. Every story has been a step on the path toward this place where you can finally put down what you have been carrying. Every word has been a small permission, a tiny loosening, a gentle suggestion that it might be safe now to close your eyes. The woman who fed the fish with her daughter, she found a way to continue loving in a world that had taken what she loved most. The jar that shattered became part of something larger, something that would shelter others from storms. The spring that seemed too small to matter became a river again, patient drop by patient drop. These are not just stories. They are maps of what is possible, instructions for how to be human when being human feels impossible, reminders that you are not the first to walk this path and you will not be the last. My teacher is gone now. Her body returned to the elements it came from, but her voice still comes to me sometimes when I am very quiet, when the boundary between memory and presence grows thin. She reminds me that we are all just arrangements of earth and water, air and fire, temporarily organized into these forms we call ourselves, destined to disperse and reorganize into other forms, other selves, other expressions of the one life that has been living itself through countless bodies since the beginning of time. This is not a sad truth, but a liberating one. It means you do not have to hold yourself together so tightly. It means you can allow yourself to dissolve a little, to flow a little, to become less solid and more fluid. It means that what feels like falling apart might actually be falling into place, into your place in the larger pattern that includes rivers and stars, in the spaces between heartbeats, where everything pauses before continuing. The bamboo has gone quiet now, the wind having moved on to other conversations. The river continues, but softer, like someone humming themselves to sleep. Even the frogs have gentled their chorus to something more like a lullaby than a celebration. The whole world is settling into its nighttime configuration, and you are part of this settling, whether you feel it yet or not. Here is what I want you to know as you move toward rest, as your eyes grow heavy with the weight of all these words, all these stories, all this permission to be exactly as tired as you are. You have not failed at anything by being awake this long. You have not broken any cosmic rule by struggling with sleep. You have simply been human in the most human way possible, conscious and conflicted, tender and tired, holding on and letting go in the same breath. The stone in your chest that we warmed earlier, do you feel how it has become less like stone and more like light, less like weight and more like warmth? This is what happens to everything we hold long enough with compassion. It transforms from burden to blessing, from what weighs us down to what lights us up, from what we carry to what carries us. Let this warm light spread through your whole body now, finding every corner that has been dark, every edge that has been sharp, every place that has been holding itself apart from the whole. You are already beginning to dream. I can tell. The boundary between waking and sleeping is not as clear as we pretend it is. You have been half dreaming all night, letting these stories carry you to places that are not quite here, but not quite elsewhere either. This liminal space, this threshold between states, this is where the deepest healing happens, where the most profound rest becomes possible, where you can be conscious and unconscious simultaneously, holding and releasing, grieving and celebrating, ending and beginning. The truth you needed to hear tonight is not one truth, but many, woven together, like the sound of the river is woven from countless smaller sounds. You needed to hear that you are not alone in your sleeplessness. You needed to hear that your worth does not depend on your productivity or your ability to rest. You needed to hear that grief and joy can coexist, that broken things still have value, that what seems like ending might be transformation. But mostly, you needed to hear that someone sees you, someone understands, someone is holding space for you to be exactly as you are in this moment. I am that someone tonight, but I am also just a voice, a story, a collection of words arranged to create a soft landing place for your tired soul. The real someone is you, the deep you that has been listening beneath the surface of these words, the you that knows how to heal, how to rest, how to continue. This is the you that will still be here when you wake, whenever that is, whether in an hour or tomorrow or next week. This you is ancient and new simultaneously, wise and innocent, strong and soft, everything you need to be to meet whatever comes next. As this long night moves toward dawn, whether the dawn outside your window or the dawn that happens when consciousness finally releases into dream, I want to leave you with one more image, one more story that is not a story, but a living truth. Imagine that all night, while we have been talking, while you have been listening, while the river has been singing and the bamboo has been whispering, a lotus has been opening in the pond beside my hut. It started as a tight bud when we began, closed against the darkness, protecting its tender center. But hour by hour, word by word, breath by breath, it has been relaxing its grip on itself, allowing its petals to soften and separate, and slowly, so slowly, open to the night. This lotus does not open because it is forced or because it is time according to some schedule. It opens because opening is its nature, because it trusts the night as much as it trusts the day, because it knows that beauty is not diminished by darkness, that fragrance carries even when no one is there to receive it, that the act of opening is its own reward, regardless of who witnesses it. You are this lotus. You have been opening all night, whether you knew it or not. Each story has been a loosening of another petal. Each breath has been a softening of another edge. And now, as we reach the place where words become unnecessary, where silence is more eloquent than speech, where rest is not just possible, but inevitable, you can feel how open you have become, open to rest, open to release, open to whatever dreams are waiting to flower in the darkness of your finally peaceful mind. Close your eyes now, dear one, not because you must, but because you can, because your body knows it is safe, because the vigil you have been keeping can finally end. The world will continue without your watchfulness. The river will flow without your attention. The bamboo will sing whether you hear it or not. Everything that needs to happen will happen, and everything that needs to wait will wait. There is nothing you need to do right now except receive the rest that has been trying to find you all night, that has been circling you like a patient animal, waiting for you to be still enough for it to approach. Let the weight of your bones tell the earth you trust it. Let the rhythm of your breath tell the air you receive it. Let the slowing of your thoughts tell your mind it can rest from its labors. Let every cell in your body remember that it comes from stars, from the infinite darkness between stars, from the silence that existed before the first word was spoken, and will exist after the last word fades. Rest well beneath the soft moon, dear traveler. Rest well beside the singing river of your own becoming. Rest well in the knowledge that you are held, have always been held, will always be held by something larger than you can imagine, something that loves you, not for what you do, but for what you are, not for your wakefulness, but for your willingness to surrender into rest. May your dreams be kind, may your sleep be deep. May you wake when you are ready, refreshed and renewed, carrying the peace of this night into whatever day awaits you. And may you remember, in the moments when rest feels impossible again, that there is a place beside a river where a monk sits in the darkness, tending a small fire, holding space for all who cannot sleep, whispering stories into the night that find their way to exactly who needs to hear them. The river sings you to sleep now. The bamboo blesses your rest. The lotus opens in the darkness, beautiful, whether seen or unseen, perfect in its patience, complete in its becoming. And you, dear one, you are already asleep, already dreaming, already resting in the arms of the night that has been waiting all along to hold you with the tenderness you deserve. Sleep now, sleep deeply, sleep well. The stories are complete. The teaching has been given. The night has received you, and I, Sora Lin, release you into the great silence where all true rest begins, and all healing happens, and all rivers eventually find their way home to the sea. May the morning find you renewed. May your heart remember this peace. May you carry the river sound with you into all your waking hours. And may you always know that here, beside this river, in this small bamboo hut, where the moonlight makes everything silver and sacred, you have a place of rest whenever you need it, a sanctuary that exists not just in these words, but in your own deep knowing that you are worthy of rest, worthy of peace, worthy of all the gentleness this world can offer. Sleep, beloved one. Sleep and be restored. The night holds you. The river sings for you. And somewhere in the darkness, a spring is beginning to bubble up from depths you cannot imagine, bringing new life to places that seemed beyond revival, proving once again that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, only waiting, only gathering itself in the darkness for the moment when it can finally flow again. This is the end of our time together tonight, but it is not an ending. It is a doorway into rest, a threshold into peace, a gentle dissolving into the sleep that your body has been calling for, that your soul has been ready for, that the night has been holding in its patient hands until you are ready to receive it. Go now into that good darkness. Go into that healing silence. Go into the rest you have earned, not through effort, but through the simple act of being human in a world that asks so much of us. Rest now. Rest completely. Rest in the knowledge that when you wake, you will be renewed, and the world will be waiting with its terrible beauty, its difficult grace, its endless invitation to begin again. Good night, dear one. Good night, and rest well. The river flows on. The bamboo stands watch, and your sleep, when it finally comes, will be as deep and healing as the source from which all rivers begin.